Today we have a bit of a journey. We're headed to Austin, Texas, a little bit outside of there to film a listing video for a really nice property. I'm gonna take this opportunity to bring you guys along and break down how to get started with real estate videography. The basics from gear to shots, everything from start to finish. So let's just hit the road because we're kind of cutting it close. Let's go. Looks like we're just pulling up. Wow, this is a pretty cool spot. Look at this. So before we get into the basics of what kind of shots you're gonna do, the type of gear, any of that stuff, you have to know why you're filming this video. The whole point of this video is to create a piece of marketing material that the realtor can use to hopefully sell the home. So if you think about it from that perspective, the whole time you're shooting, you're probably gonna shoot it a lot better versus thinking, oh, this shot might be really cool, or this transition might be cool in editing. None of that stuff really matters. If anything, it can be more distracting and take away from the video. So just think about it from that perspective that you're trying to sell the home. All right. What do you guys think of my little lav for my iPhone? Works pretty well, right? Let me know what you think of the audio down below. So now let's talk about gear, specifically the 3 things that are most important to real estate videos and what you need. You need an interchangeable camera, a wide angle lens, and a gimbal. So now let's start with the camera. So you really want a camera where you can change out the lenses, good low light capabilities, and can do at least 1080p video. With that, you're set. And the reason you want really good low light capabilities is because a lot of these houses have fluctuating light. Most of them are pretty dark, so if you don't want a super noisy video, you're gonna want a camera that has pretty good low light performance. In this case, I use a Canon R6, which is a phenomenal camera because it has incredible low light performances, and I'm super happy with it. Works great for real estate. You also want a wide angle lens for real estate videos because you wanna be able to showcase as much as you can in the room in that one shot. If you have a tighter lens and it's not very wide, it's just not gonna look right and you're not gonna get the point across, it's not gonna look very well. So 16 is a really good sweet spot that I found. You can go all the way from like 14 to 17 full frame equivalent, and that is a really good starting point. I'm using a 16 to 35 f4 IS from Canon. I've been using this lens since I started real estate photography, works great. Only drawback is it is an f4, so what that means is the aperture doesn't open up super wide, it's pretty narrow, so it doesn't let in a ton of light, but luckily I'm using a Canon R6, which has incredible low light to make up for it. But ideally you want something with an f-stop at least 2.8 or faster, so your video is really clean. And finally, the gimbal. The gimbal is honestly the staple of what you need to get smooth shots for real estate videos, especially because you're going in and out of rooms, going through weird, small, narrow areas. Anything bigger is just not gonna work well. So this right here is the DJI Ronin S, not even the latest model. This works great, super smooth. I've used other gimbals that honestly didn't work the best, so this one does what it is meant to do, which is just give you smooth shots, super happy with it. This is a bit of a heavy setup, but that's why you wanna try and get a camera and lens setup that is more on the lighter side because it's gonna be pretty heavy after using it for a while and multiple shoots. But I definitely recommend the Ronin S, but also check out others by Zhiyun, Moza. All of them make great gimbals, they do the job. So just get what you can afford and get started. But yeah, this has been my setup for real estate photo and video since I started. This combo works great. I try and keep it as simple as possible. And here's a few other bonuses that if you can get into after you start real estate videos that can make your videos even better. That would be a prime lens. You wanna show off details of the home, not in a wide perspective. That way in the edit, you can break up the wide shots using a tighter lens, like a 50mm 1.4, that's what I'm gonna use later. And a drone. An aerial perspective of your property is gonna change it so much, and especially a place like this that has a ton of land, it's a must. Lastly, you're gonna want to also get one of these. This here is a polarizer. You want to use one of these because it's going to cut the glare out of wood floors, deepen your blue skies, and overall give you a better image. So now let's talk about the types of shots you want to get and how to shoot these. First of all, before you step foot to any real estate video shoot, learn how to properly use a gimbal. Trust me, it is not easy getting the motions of these first try. It takes a bit of practice, especially the ninja walk. You want to walk as smooth as possible, otherwise you're going to get a whole bunch of up and down movement and it's going to defeat the purpose of having a gimbal because your shots aren't going to be smooth. So now what kind of shots do you do? Well, you want to keep it simple. You don't want to do over the top, trendy, crazy transition moves. That's not what this is about. You want to stick to basic movements. And like me, I stick to 3 movements. Straight forward, which is like a dolly shot, left to right, and a combination of both to make like a walk-in parallax shot. That's it. Even for all my detail shots. Left to right, straight forward, walking in, revealing, that's pretty much it. The reason for it is the more complex the shots and all of that stuff, it's gonna be distracting to the viewer, take away from the video. It's just not for this. Now, unless you're doing something like Instagram Reels or TikToks, totally do all that stuff there. But for like a traditional real estate video to showcase the home, keep it simple. And the reason you wanna keep it simple and similar shots is it's gonna look a lot better in the edit. If you do one shot from left to right, then the next one is left to right, and even the next one, that's gonna cut so much smoother versus left to right, up and down, crazy movement. It's not gonna flow well. So here's what I do for feature rooms. I stick to about 2 to 4 shots, showcasing every angle, just thinking about what would the viewer wanna see if they were interested in this home. For secondary, not so important rooms, I just do 1 to 2 shots, basically just walking in, showcasing what you see as if you were walking in on your own. But trust me, if you keep it simple, smooth, and think about what you're trying to portray, what the subject is of that specific shot, how you're showcasing the rooms, your edit will come along a lot better and a better looking video. So I'm completely done with the interior, all the wides, all the details. Now it's just exterior and drone that's left. But now's a good chance to break down camera settings. It can be really complicated and daunting, especially because you want to avoid using auto anything to get the best image possible. So now I'm gonna give you 3 major tips. First of all, you want to shoot in log if your camera supports that. So a log profile is a flatter color profile that lets you capture more detail in the highlights and the shadows, and then in editing, you can get more dynamic range out of your camera. And especially because you're shooting inside with really bright windows, half the time those windows are gonna look white. Now you get more dynamic range shooting log, looks a lot better. So definitely watch a tutorial. I have one, I'll link it up here on how to grade your real estate videos for log and standard profiles. Next up, use a custom white balance. Avoid using auto white balance because again, you're dealing with mixed lighting. So whenever you're going from room to room or scene to scene, or even in the same room, your white balance might shift from magenta to green to warm to cool, depending on what your camera thinks is correct. You wanna have it locked in on the most balanced white balance for the room. That way in editing, if you have to tweak it a little bit, it's gonna be way easier than having to deal with a white balance that's going all crazy and auto. Don't do it, you're not gonna get good results. Learn how to use your white balance, easily adjust it before each room, and you'll be good to go. Last tip is frame rates. Whether you're shooting in 1080p or 4K, I shoot all my interiors at 30 frames per second and all my details at 60 frames per second, along with the exterior shots. And here's why. I do all of my editing on a 24 frames per second timeline. So whenever I bring that 30 frames per second clip into a 24, I can reduce it by 80%, making it a little bit slower. That way, if I went too fast, it'll look cleaner. Extending the clip out, I have a little bit more flexibility. Same thing with the details. Sometimes I'll just shoot them way too fast, so I'll shoot them at 60 frames per second so I can slow it down by 40%, giving it that slow cinematic look. Especially because the exterior has a ton of light outside. That's why you can get away with shooting at 60 frames per second I don't recommend going through the whole house for your regular shots at 60 frames because you're gonna have to bump up your shutter to at least 1/125th, making it a lot more noisy versus 1/60th or 1/50th. Whew, that was a mouthful. And then just for your basic settings, I keep my ISO as low as possible, depending on the base ISO of your camera. So for log profiles, you have to find out what your base ISO is. On my Canon R6, it's ISO 800, so that's what I try and keep it at. Otherwise, I have to compensate for darker areas by bumping it up. Otherwise, if you're shooting in a regular color profile, you can probably use ISO 100. Your shutter speed is always gonna be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you want your shutter at 1/60th, 24 frames per second, 1/50, and 60 frames per second, 1/125. Any slower than that, if there's any movement in your shot, it's gonna look really dreamy, not correct, because it's not the right shutter speed. And lastly, your aperture. That's why you want a lens with a fast aperture, especially if your camera doesn't have the best low light capabilities, because then you can bring your f-stop all the way down to 2.8 or faster, letting in more light into that lens, resulting in a cleaner image. Especially because you have a really wide field of view, you're not gonna really get depth of field, so you can shoot at 2.8 and it's still gonna get pretty much everything in detail. It's gonna look fine and cleaner. But then if you're in a scene that has tons of light, like outside, you can shoot at f8, f9. Those are good stops. And my biggest pro tip is to use a histogram. Let me show you. Especially if you're using log profiles, a histogram is gonna give you the most accurate representation of your exposure. So this is what I'm using right now for this exterior shot, 1/60th for 30 frames per second, f9 because there's plenty of light, and ISO 800 because that's my base ISO for C-Log 3. And if you look at my histogram, it is perfectly exposed. Now let's get the shot. So now I'm gonna hit on my last point, which is the types of shots that you're gonna get. How do you know what shots to get? All of that good stuff. So I suggest using a shot list. Especially if you're starting out, you wanna avoid overshooting and undershooting, capturing things you don't necessarily need to, not getting enough of the things you need to. So talking to your realtor ahead of time and asking them, hey, what's important in this video? What do you really wanna highlight? What do you really wanna showcase is gonna be really important. Now you know what to shoot. You're going in with a game plan. It's gonna go a lot smoother. Especially because of the fact that you can easily miss bedrooms, small bathrooms, things like that. And trust me, I've done it before. It's no fun when you have to drive back out to a property to get that shot. So my biggest pro tip is also to shoot to edit. Think about the final edit, visualize it, come up with a game plan beforehand, and shoot the shots in the order and the manner that you're gonna edit it, making it so much easier. Now I'm gonna wrap up this video, gonna get a few more exterior shots now that it's nice and blue hour. It's gonna look nice. And that's a wrap, guys. That's everything that I would do if I was starting right now. This should get you started and get you on the path for creating some awesome real estate videos. And honestly, this is a pretty awesome industry to be in. There's constant work. Houses are always being sold. They need photo and video content. So if you can learn to deliver really great quality, a lot of connections in your area, you're gonna have steady work. Which is why I started my business, Pro Real Media, in this field. So leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts, subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you guys to be part of the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya. Just a couple more shots left. Always have to come back for the camera.
Tanya Erickson, real estate agent with the Collective Real Estate Group, and this is 170 Preakness Court.